The lecture hall on Sector 9 smelled like burnt copper and regret. That's what happens when you cram 200 cadets from 40 different species into a room designed for half that number. I was there because my superior officer thought it would be, quote, enlightening to attend a human military history seminar. Enlightening. Right. About as enlightening as staring directly into a neutron star. The human girl stood at the podium, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Her name was Kate Morrison, according to the hollow display floating above her head, and she was maybe 20 cycles old, give or take. Scrawny thing. The kind of creature that looked like a strong breeze would snap her in half. Her hair was pulled back in something humans called a ponytail, and she wore the standard academy uniform, which hung on her frame like it was 2 sizes too big. General Vrask sat in the front row, his 4 arms crossed in that way that screamed, "I am very important and very bored." The Corthan military commander was a legend, supposedly, conquered 17 systems before his breakfast molt. He had scales that shimmered like oil slicks and eyes that could freeze plasma mid-burn. He was also, as it turned out, a complete jackass. "Proceed, Cadet," he rumbled, not even bothering to look at her directly. Kate cleared her throat. The microphone squealed. Half the room winced. "Today I'll be discussing the Battle of Thermopylae, which took place on Earth in 480 BCE. Earth," Vrask interrupted, examining one of his claws with theatrical disinterest. "That's the dirt ball that barely survived first contact, correct? The planet that needed 3 cycles just to figure out basic plasma shielding?" A few snickers rippled through the crowd. I felt my secondary stomach clench. This was going to be painful. Kate's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed level. "Yes, sir. The same planet that's now responsible for 32% of the Galactic Alliance's defensive innovations." Oh, she had teeth. Interesting. Vrask's head swiveled toward her with mechanical precision. "Defensive? How quaint. Tell me, Cadet, does your presentation include any actual military victories, or is it another tedious exercise in how humans barely survive their own stupidity?" The room went quiet. Dead quiet. The kind of silence that makes your gill slits slam shut. Kate smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that made me suddenly reassess every assumption I'd ever made about prey species. "Actually, sir, it's about 300 soldiers who held off an army of over 100,000 for 3 days, with nothing but bronze weapons and what we call spite." "Spite." Vrask laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "You mean fear dressed up as bravery? Cornered animals will do anything to postpone the inevitable." Several cadets shifted uncomfortably. Kate didn't move, didn't blink. "The Spartans at Thermopylae knew they were going to die," she said, and something in her voice made the temperature in the room drop. "They knew it from the moment they marched into that pass. King Leonidas was told by an oracle that either Sparta would fall or one of her kings would die. He chose himself. 300 volunteers went with him. Not because they were cornered, because they decided that some things matter more than survival." Vrask leaned back, all 4 arms spreading in a gesture of mock surrender. How touching. 300 fools throw their lives away for symbolism. This is what humans consider strategic thinking? They bought time, Kate shot back. And now there was steel in her voice. Those 3 days allowed the Greek city-states to mobilize, to prepare, to eventually defeat the Persian Empire. 300 men changed the course of Western civilization by refusing to run, by standing in a gap and saying, "Not one step further." "Pretty words for pretty corpses," Vrask said, and I could see his tail beginning to lash. He was enjoying this. The bastard was actually enjoying humiliating a cadet in front of the entire academy. In real warfare, we value soldiers who live to fight another day. We value tactical retreat. We value survival. Kate's hands gripped the podium. "And that's why you lost Kepler. 442b. The room exploded. Not literally. though for a moment I thought someone might actually start shooting. Cadets gasped. Officers stood up. Someone dropped their datapad, and it clattered like thunder. Vrask went very, very still. His scales rippled through a color spectrum I'd only seen once before, right before he'd ordered an entire battalion into a meat grinder. What? Say. Kate didn't back down. Her knuckles were white on that podium, but her voice was steady. 3 months ago, you had a garrison of 10,000 troops on Kepler 442b. When the Threx attacked with superior numbers, you ordered a tactical retreat. By the book. Textbook strategy. You abandoned the colony to save your soldiers. I preserved valuable military assets, Vrask hissed. You let 17,000 colonists die, Kate said flatly, because you valued survival over standing your ground. The Threx took the planet in 6 hours, used it as a staging ground for their push into the outer rim. We're still trying to take it back. Tell me, General, how many soldiers have died trying to reclaim what you gave up without firing a shot? I thought Vrask was going to leap across the room and tear her apart. His scales had gone completely black, which in Corthan biology means you're about 3 seconds from lethal violence. The guard by the door actually put his hand on his weapon. Then Vrask smiled. Oh, that was worse. So much worse. You dare question my decisions, Cadet? You? A third-year student who's never seen real combat? Who's never watched your platoon vaporized in front of you? Who's never had to make the choice between certain death and living to fight another day? Kate met his eyes. My father was on Kepler 442b. The words dropped like stones in still water. He was part of the Colonial Defense Force, she continued, and her voice was conversational now, almost friendly. Former Marine. Retired. Thought he'd spend his last years farming and maybe teaching the local kids how to shoot. When your garrison pulled out, he organized the colonists, mostly farmers, shopkeepers, a couple of other veterans. They held the spaceport for 11 hours with hunting rifles and improvised explosives. 11 hours, General. Long enough for 3 transport ships to escape. 900 people got out because my dad and 42 civilians decided to channel their inner Spartans. And where is your father now? Vrask asked, but I could hear something new in his voice. Something that might have been uncertainty. Dead, Kate said simply. They're all dead, but those 900 people are alive, and they remember who saved them. Spoiler alert, it wasn't you. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight, physical presence. I could feel it pressing against my sensory organs. Vrask stood up slowly, all 2.5 meters of him. You think your primitive history lessons impress me? You think one example of successful sacrifice validates throwing lives away? No, Kate said, and now she smiled again. That terrifying smile. I think you're scared. Excuse me? You heard me. You're terrified. All of you are. She looked around the room, making eye contact with random cadets. Every species in this alliance that evolved as predators, that climbed to the top of your food chains through strength and speed and natural weapons. You can't understand humans because we weren't supposed to win. We were prey. We were the things that got eaten. We had no venom, no claws, no armor, no speed. We should have died out before we invented fire. She was moving now, stepping out from behind the podium, and every eye in the room followed her. But we didn't die. We survived. And do you know how? Not by running faster, not by fighting harder. We survived by being absolutely too stubborn to quit. We survived by looking at impossible odds and saying, okay, but have you considered that I don't care? A Vrelian cadet in the 3rd row made a chittering sound that might have been laughter. Kate pointed at him. You think that's funny? Your species has military doctrine going back 10,000 years. Beautiful strategy. Elegant tactics. You know what human military doctrine is? Keep shooting until either they're dead or we are, and we'll figure out the details later. We built nuclear weapons before we had computers. We went to space on controlled explosions we barely understood. We're the species that looked at warfare and said, "You know what this needs? More chaos." "Chaos is not strategy," Vrask growled. "No," Kate agreed. "But it is terrifying, and that's what you can't handle. You can calculate our firepower. You can analyze our formations. You can predict our tactics. What you can't predict is what we'll do when everything goes wrong, because we don't retreat. We don't surrender. We just get creative." She walked closer to Vrask. Dangerously close. The guard's hand was definitely on his weapon now. "The Battle of Thermopylae ended with every single Spartan dead," Kate said softly. "And Persia remembered them for centuries. They told stories about the warriors who wouldn't break, who couldn't be broken. Because there's something you need to understand about humans, General." "And what's that?" Vrask asked, and I noticed his scales were shifting again. Not to black this time. To something else. Something I didn't recognize. Kate's voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow everyone heard it. "You can kill us. You can destroy our worlds. You can burn everything we love. But you cannot, ever. We're the species that looked at extinction and said, 'Try me.'" The wall behind her cracked. Not a little crack. A major structural fracture that ran from floor to ceiling, spiderwebbing across the reinforced concrete like lightning frozen in stone. Alarms started blaring. The building shuddered. Everyone stared. At the wall. At Kate. At the wall again. "Did she just—" someone whispered. "The walls on this station are apparently not rated for dramatic emphasis. You might want to get that checked." Vrask's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. For the first time since I'd known the general, he appeared to be at a complete loss for words. Kate walked back to the podium, collected her notes, and looked out at the stunned audience. "Class dismissed, I guess? Try not to let the existential terror keep you up at night." She walked out of the lecture hall with her head high, leaving 200 cadets, 15 officers, and one legendary general staring at a cracked wall and reassessing everything they thought they knew about humanity. I looked at Vrask. He was still staring at the empty doorway. "General?" I ventured. He didn't respond for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he said, "Get me her service record. All of it." "Sir? That human? I want to know everything about her. Background, scores, psychological profile, everything." "May I ask why, sir?" Vrask finally looked at me, and his scales had settled into a pale blue I'd never seen before. It took me a moment to place the color. It was the shade Corthans turned when they felt something they rarely experienced. Respect. "Because," Vrask said slowly, "I just realized we've been training these humans wrong. We've been teaching them to fight like us, to think like us, to be strategic and calculated and rational. Isn't that the point of the academy?" "It was." Vrask walked toward the door, then paused. "But after today, I'm not so sure. Maybe, just maybe, we should be learning from them instead. Because if that girl is even remotely representative of her species, and they ever decide we're the enemy—" He looked back at the cracked wall one more time. "God help us all." He left. The cadets slowly filed out, speaking in hushed whispers. I stayed behind, staring at that crack in the wall. The building hadn't been hit. No seismic activity. No structural failure. The wall had cracked when Kate made her final declaration, when she'd said those two words with such absolute conviction that reality itself seemed to take notice. "Try me." I pulled out my communicator and made a note. "Request transfer to Human Studies Division. Priority Alpha. If the humans could break walls with sheer force of will and stubborn defiance, I wanted to be very, very far away if they ever decided to break something more important. Or better yet, I wanted to be on their side." The wall groaned. Another crack appeared. I left quickly, before the building decided to make a point of its own. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for 0800 hours the next morning. I wasn't supposed to be there, but my request for transfer had apparently flagged me as involved personnel. So, lucky me, I got a front row seat to what everyone assumed would be Kate Morrison's execution. Career-wise, anyway. The tribunal room was smaller than the lecture hall, which somehow made it worse. More intimate, more personal. 3 admirals sat behind a curved desk that looked like it cost more than my annual salary. Admiral Thorne, a human with more medals than chest space. Admiral Cassix, a Vrelian whose compound eyes saw in 17 different spectrums. And Admiral Vrask himself. Because apparently yesterday's humiliation wasn't enough. Kate stood at attention in the center of the room, still wearing that too-big uniform, still looking like she weighed about as much as a regulation sidearm. She didn't look scared. She looked tired. Cadet Morrison, Admiral Thorne began, her voice carrying that particular flavor of disappointment that only senior officers can truly master. "Do you understand why you're here?" "Yes, ma'am. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Kate was quiet for a moment. Then, the wall was structurally compromised before I entered the room. Maintenance logs will show microfractures dating back 3 weeks. It was bound to fail. I just happened to be there when it did. Admiral Cassix's antennae twitched. How convenient. Yes, sir. Very convenient. Almost like the universe has a sense of timing. I bit back a laugh. She was going to get herself expelled, and she was making jokes. Humans were absolutely insane. Admiral Thorne pulled up a holo display. "We're not here about the wall, Cadet. We're here about your conduct toward a superior officer. General Vrask has filed a formal complaint regarding insubordination, disrespect, and conduct unbecoming of an academy student." Kate's expression didn't change. "Understood, ma'am." "You accuse the general of cowardice in front of 200 witnesses?" "No, ma'am. I accused him of making a tactical decision that cost civilian lives. I said he was scared. Those are different things." Vrask's tail lashed once, twice. "Semantics will not save you, Cadet." "I'm not trying to be saved, sir. I'm trying to make a point." "Your point has been noted," Admiral Thorne said coldly, "and rejected. In the military, we maintain a chain of command. We respect rank. We do not publicly humiliate our superiors, regardless of our personal feelings about their decisions." Kate nodded slowly. "I understand, ma'am. May I ask a question?" "You may. What would you have done at Kepler 4.2b if you'd been in command?" The room temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Admiral Thorne's jaw tightened. "That's not relevant to these proceedings." "Respectfully, ma'am, it's the only thing that's relevant. Because if you would have made the same call, then you're right. I was out of line. But if you wouldn't have, if you would have stayed and fought, then we have a bigger problem than one mouthy cadet." "And what problem is that?" Admiral Cassix asked, leaning forward. Kate met his multifaceted gaze without flinching. "We're training people to follow orders without question. We're building a military that values procedure over people. We're creating officers who make decisions based on preserving resources instead of protecting lives. And eventually, sir, we're going to lose a war because someone followed the rules instead of doing what was right." Vrask stood up, his chair scraping against the floor with a screech that made everyone wince. "You know nothing about war, child. Nothing about the weight of command. Nothing about watching good soldiers die because you made the wrong call." "You're right," Kate said simply. "I don't know. I've never been there. But my father was, and he taught me that there are worse things than dying, like living with the knowledge that you could have made a difference and chose not to. Your father was a fool who threw his life away." Kate's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but her voice stayed level. "My father was a hero who saved 900 people. And the only reason you're uncomfortable with that fact is because it makes you look like exactly what you are. A coward with shiny medals. Vrask moved fast. Faster than something his size had any right to move. He was across the room in 2 strides, towering over Kate, all 4 arms extended like he was going to grab her and snap her in half. Kate didn't move. Didn't even blink. "Say that again," Vrask hissed, his face centimeters from hers. "I dare you." Kate smiled. That terrible smile. "You're a coward, General. You hide behind regulations and tactical doctrine because you're terrified of making the hard choices. You'd rather lose a planet than risk your precious win-loss ratio. You'd rather let civilians die than face the possibility that you might fail. And deep down, in whatever passes for a soul in that armored chest of yours, you know I'm right." The room held its breath. Vrask stared at her. She stared back. Then, slowly, the General started to laugh. Not the grinding rocks laugh from yesterday. This was different. Genuine. Almost warm. He straightened up, stepped back, and all 4 arms moved to clasp behind his back in a formal rest position. "Admiral Thorne," he said, not taking his eyes off Kate, "I withdraw my complaint. You could have knocked me over with a feather. You could have knocked over the entire tribunal with a strong exhale. General?" Admiral Thorne looked as confused as I felt. "Are you certain?" "Completely." Vrask nodded to Kate. The cadet was correct. "About Kepler?" 4-4, 2B. "About my decision. About me." The silence that followed was profound. Admiral Cassix's antennae were doing a complicated dance that I'm pretty sure meant he was experiencing the Vrelian equivalent of a system crash. "General Vrask, are you feeling well? Should we call medical?" "I'm fine, Admiral. Better than fine. I'm enlightened." He looked at Kate with something that might have been admiration. "Tell me, Cadet, why did you really challenge me yesterday? And don't give me that speech about truth and honor? What was the real reason?" Kate was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Because I'm tired, sir. Tired of being told that human ways are wrong, that we're too emotional, too irrational, too willing to die for stupid reasons. I'm tired of instructors looking at our history and seeing failure instead of determination. I'm tired of being ashamed of what we are." "And what are you?" "Survivors, sir. We're the species that should have gone extinct 1,000 times over. We're not the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest, but we're still here. And maybe, just maybe, that counts for something." Vrask nodded, slowly. "It counts for everything, Cadet, which is why I'm recommending you for immediate advancement to Officer Candidate School." This time I actually did fall over, caught myself on a nearby chair, but still. Dignity. Gone. Kate looked equally shocked. "Sir? You have fire?" Vrask said. "You have conviction. You're willing to speak truth to power, even when it costs you. Those are qualities we desperately need in our officer corps. Especially now." "Especially now?" Admiral Thorne echoed. Vrask pulled up a hollow display of his own. Star charts, battle reports, intelligence briefings. The Threx are massing at the border. 300 ships, maybe more. They're planning something big, something that will require every advantage we have. "What does this have to do with Cadet Morrison?" Admiral Cassix asked. "Everything." Vrask gestured to the data. "Look at our recent engagements. Victory after victory for the Threx. You know why? Because they can predict us. They know how we think. They know our doctrines. They know that when faced with overwhelming odds, we'll retreat, regroup, reassess. They're counting on it." Admiral Thorne's eyes widened. "You want to change our fundamental strategy." "I want to introduce chaos," Vrask said. "I want unpredictability. I want officers who look at a no-win scenario and say, 'Watch me win anyway.' I want humans." He looked at Kate. I want her kind of crazy in my command structure. Kate blinked. I'm not sure that's a compliment, sir. It's the highest compliment I can give. Vrask turned to the other admirals. We've spent 50 years trying to make humans fight like us. It's time we learned to fight like them. Cadet Morrison just gave us a masterclass in what that looks like. Admiral Thorne studied Kate for a long moment. Cadet, if we approve this advancement, you'll be commanding troops in 6 months, possibly sooner. Real soldiers, real battles, real consequences. Are you prepared for that? Responsibility? Kate took a deep breath. No, ma'am, but I don't think anyone ever really is. My father wasn't. The Spartans at Thermopylae weren't. They just did it anyway, because someone had to. So, if you're asking if I'm willing to try, then yes. Absolutely yes. Even if it kills you? Admiral Casix asked quietly. Kate's smile was sad this time. Gentle. Sir, I'm human. Everything kills us eventually. We just try to make it count. Admiral Thorne looked at her fellow admirals. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. Finally, she nodded. Motion approved. Cadet Morrison, you are hereby advanced to Officer Candidate School, effective immediately. Congratulations, Candidate Morrison. Try not to break anything else. Kate saluted. Her hand was shaking slightly. I noticed. I'll do my best, ma'am. Dismissed. Kate turned and walked toward the door. I started to follow, then paused when Vrask spoke again. Candidate Morrison? She stopped. Turned. Sir? Your father would be proud. Kate's composure finally cracked. Just a little. That means more than you know. She left. The door closed behind her. Admiral Thorne looked at Vrask. That was quite the performance, General. Care to explain what just happened? Vrask settled back into his chair. I made a mistake at Kepler 442b. I prioritized military assets over civilian lives. I followed doctrine instead of instinct. And 17,000 people died because I was too afraid to risk my soldiers. You were following established protocol, Admiral Casix pointed out. I was being a coward, Vrask corrected. Just like she said. And if we're going to survive what's coming, we can't afford any more cowards in command. We need people who'll stand in the gap and refuse to move. We need Spartans. Admiral Thorne pulled up the star charts again. You really think the humans are the key? I think they're the only reason we've survived this long, Vrask said. They bring something to the Alliance that the rest of us lack. Hope. Stubbornness. The absolute refusal to accept defeat. We analyze probabilities and make logical decisions. They look at a 1% chance of success and say, so you're telling me there's a chance. I cleared my throat. Sir, if I may, the wall yesterday, do you really think it was structural failure? Vrask's scales rippled with amusement. Does it matter? The building inspectors found the microfractures, just like she said. But between you and me? He leaned forward. I think that girl was so angry, so absolutely done with my nonsense, that the universe itself decided to back her up. And I never want to be on the wrong side of someone who can make reality flinch. Admiral Casix chittered nervously. That's not scientifically possible. Neither are humans, Vrask pointed out. By every biological metric, they should be extinct. Instead, they're here. They're thriving. They're teaching us that impossible just means nobody's tried hard enough yet. Admiral Thorne stood. Well then, I suppose we'd better start learning. Meeting adjourned. The admirals filed out. I stayed behind, looking at the empty chair where Kate had stood. Something on your mind? Vrask asked, pausing at the door. Just thinking, sir, about what happens when humans finally stop trying to be like us and start being fully themselves. Vrask's laugh was warm this time. Actually warm. Then, my friend, the galaxy had better brace itself. Because I have a feeling we haven't seen anything yet. He left. I sat there in the empty tribunal room, thinking about cracked walls and impossible victories and the species that refused to quit. Somewhere in the distance, alarms started blaring. Emergency channels lighting up. I pulled out my communicator and saw the reports flooding in. The Threx had attacked, right on schedule. 300 ships, maybe more. And every human vessel in the fleet was moving to intercept, despite being outnumbered 5-1. I thought about Kate Morrison and her father and 300 Spartans who faced impossible odds with nothing but bronze and spite. Then I smiled. The Threx had no idea what they were in for. Because humans, it turned out, didn't just study history. They repeated it, on purpose, with extreme prejudice. I grabbed my gear and headed for my ship. If this was going to be humanity's moment, I wanted a front row seat. Besides, someone needed to document what happened when you told an entire species, "Try me," and they took it personally. This was going to be one hell of a fight. And somewhere, I was pretty sure, Kate Morrison was smiling, that terrible smile. The galaxy shook. The humans had entered the chat. Game on.